Coming up after 3, we'll speak to a man named Harry. He was a city trader. I'm sure he's about to go back to being a city trader. And he went to fight Islamic State. He's just got back with, I'm sure, many tales to tell. But should he have gone in the first place? 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Harry will be joining me in the studio after 3. With me in the studio right now is Stephen Greenhalgh, Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime and London mayoral candidate to boot. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
You announced your candidacy some months ago. What's the campaign consisted of so far? What have you been focusing on?
It's been pretty low key. I thought I'd start off early before the general election, which gets in the way of things. And that was a very, very long general election period from about January to, I guess, May the 7th. And quite rightly, everybody's focused on that. But I announced that I threw my hat in the ring, if you like, with a view to say what are the big issues for London, and they're pretty familiar. I mean, it's how do you build more homes, how do you deal with the transport pressures, but importantly also how do you make sure the city remains safe on a reduced budget. So I'm very clear that the choice for London is how do we deal with the problems and pressures of a growing city and deliver tangible policies that make London less expensive.
Can people look to your activities in Hammersmith when you worked at Hammersmith and Fulham Council, and you were known as a man who was able to cut when he needed to? Can people look to that experience and expect the same here when you're talking about reduced budgets?
Well, when I took over the first administration in Hammersmith and Fulham for the Conservatives back in 2006, a long time ago, I was leader for 6 years, first majority administration for nearly 40 years. We didn't just talk about cuts. It was actually about delivering savings, but also improving the quality of public services. I really do care about public services, but they have to be high quality and absolutely at the lowest cost to the taxpayer. But more than that, that's not even enough. You have to have a long-term vision, and I think the borough had a vision of opportunity, which is very much the vision that I want to bring to London. And the city is all about opportunity. They're engines of opportunity. Schools are important, housing's important, regeneration's important.
So you've said that it's in a sense the same old issues, and there's nothing wrong with that, because there are the same old issues, because they're issues that are key to people's lives.
Talking it is not enough. You've got to deliver it.
But tell me the vision for that then. If you
cities. Well, you've got to understand how you can deliver. I mean, as people come out with a good soundbite, that doesn't mean anything. You've got to say, where are we going to take London? How do we ensure that London in the 21st century doesn't have the same fate as Vienna when my mother went to university in the 20th century? We do not want an era of decline. In order to do that,
tell me how.
Well, but you start to think about how you practically grow. Transportation systems and where you have stations are the routes to grow. So in my borough, not far from where the BBC is based in White City, saw the opportunity where Crossrail could intersect with high-speed rail to create a new city for London. Tens of thousands of jobs, 10,000 new homes. That was going to be part Royal City. It's now a mayoral development corporation launched by my boss. Understanding how you grow cities, how you get the frameworks right, where you can intensify, but equally protect what's good, that requires a clear vision.
Do you have a hope if Zach Goldsmith is up against you?
Well, I'm delighted we've got a strong field. Everyone was complaining that we didn't have a strong field, and the party absolutely needs choices. But I back my record over a decade in the engine room of government against anyone's. And I think that every party needs choices. It's great. It looks like Zach, subject to his referendums coming in the ring. It's great. We have Sol, an amazing professional footballer, and from what I gather, a fantastic guy. We've got other candidates as well.
Very politically inexperienced. I talked about this on the other day with LBC listeners about whether it matters that somebody is as inexperienced politically.
And what do people think?
Mixture of views, as ever. It's a mixture of views. Some people wanted a fresh face, somebody with a completely different approach. But you're saying you need a vision, you need experience.
No, it's more than that. I mean, at the end of the day, I was speaking before we went on air. I'm not obsessed with politics for politics' sake. I've had 20 years as a businessman in both blue chip companies, but also setting up a small business. And it's important to have business experience, but it's also to bring to bear and how you can deliver better and more effective public services. And you do require vision.
When the gloves are off, are the gloves going to come off at any point in this campaign, or are you all going to be constantly nice to each other because you're trying to get the nomination for the same party? Because one thing you could easily use is saying, "Oh God, we've got an old Etonian Prime Minister, we've got an old Etonian standing as mayor." You don't want. I mean, that would be such a backward step, wouldn't it? It would look very much like the old Thai connections are what work.
I mean, I'm not going to fight on that because we've got the Prime Minister who obviously went to the same school as my boss. I went to the same school as the Chancellor. It's neither here nor there. But what matters is not the the opportunities your parents gave to you, but what you can contribute to the City of London.
It might not be anything to you, it might not be anything to me, but people might look at it and think, God, what a clique.
Well, I'm not in anybody's clique.
No, but how can you... You might have to respond to that with voters if they say, come on, you're all in the same club.
We all come to this city from different places. You know, my father came from Derbyshire, very, very tough background, and was the first person in his family to get to university. My mother grew up in Central Europe, had a very tough time. London is that great place where you can have everything. The future is there for anybody. You have the freedom to dream a better future. So I think that's what cities are about. It doesn't really matter where you went to school.
Fine words, and I'm sure in part they're true. But again, when we were talking on this programme earlier this week about what the Labour Party is for, interestingly enough, we got a lot of calls from people saying no politicians seem to understand that nowadays you can work and work and work and still not be able to pay your bills. And this was in relation to a conversation about the Labour Party. But you're saying there, London, city of dreams. For many people, London is a city of hard work and no reward.
Well, I didn't mean to imply that hard work isn't anything other than what you need to secure the dreams. I want some
but it
kind of
isn't even securing the dreams for some people, even though they're putting in the hours.
Well, that's very true. I'm not saying...
What do you bring to that?
It's very true that there are challenges in the city, and that's why I think looking to make London less expensive is important. Building on the successes of Boris is very, very important. I mean, we've had a fantastic record in cutting crime, and public safety is the root and foundation of prosperity. If people don't feel safe, you can't get a city that will thrive. You have to have that environment where money wants to come to London and help build the city and grow the city. Otherwise, we're going to fall behind. But equally, you've got to do your bit for...
What about his failures? You're going to put those right?
Well, you've got to... Well, that's you've got to address and think about how people who are on low incomes, who are in jobs where they're paying through the nose to get to work, what can the mayor tangibly do to make their lives better? Well, I pledged a 3% tax cut, not the tax cut, that was back in Hammersmith Fulham, a 3% fare cut for tubes,
nice.
freezing the buses.
Tax cut.
3% fare. Well, I'd love to. The mayor should have more tax raising powers.
It sank in a bit late.
Well, I love tax cuts, but equally you've got to deliver better services. 3% fare cut, and that saves about £900 on a Zone 1 to 3 Oyster card. So that's a tangible way you can help people not have to spend an hour and a half paying their fare to go into work. That's something a mayor can deliver. But equally, you've got to have a vision about how you deal with the housing problem. At the moment, you are being forced to think about a system that taxes homes to build more homes, and we've got to find a way of building more homes.
You mentioned that 3% fare cut. Can you really, in this campaign, either here and now or during the campaign going on, promise that 3% fare cut?
Ever.
When George Osborne announces that the Department of Transport, TfL, might face really quite severe cuts?
Well, whatever the central government budget will be, and I'm sure it will be tight, I believe that there are opportunities for the TfL to take huge savings out of the budget, not least because they own a land take that is bigger than the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. It's a huge amount of land. There are huge revenue generating opportunities. It's an organisation that can still take cost out and deliver a quality service. It's really important that Transport for London is there, and it's absolutely far better than it was when Boris took over. It's had all that investment, but equally now the challenge for a future mayor is how do you ensure that we get the fares down over time, and I think I can do that.
London has suffered as much or more than any city from terrorism, as we all know. What do you make of what David Anderson QC has said when it comes to surveillance powers? He clearly thinks the government should need more, but he doesn't want a politician in charge of it.
In my role as Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, you have regular briefings from the head of counter-terrorism policing, and the real issue is, of course, as technology moves on, there's a degradation of the police capability to be able to monitor these people that are not only radical but at risk of creating terror, and the legislation is needed to ensure that they can keep us safe.
You're happier to see it tougher, but what about the move from politician to judge deciding when those surveillance powers are used?
Judicial oversight, I think, makes sense to me. I mean, having some kind of judicial, independent, impartial oversight does make sense. OK, many thanks, Stephen Greenhalgh. We have to leave it there, but many thanks for coming in, Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime and London mayoral candidate as well. Thanks very much indeed. Good to talk to you.